very warm welcome to everybody here today to join us on this webinar, where we're going to be discussing the issue of SAP patching, which is a very crucial but very challenging aspect of maintaining good SAP practices. So before we go into the webinar, I do have to inform you that we will be recording the session, and that session will be available on request afterwards. We also will be leaving some time for Q&A, so if you've got any questions at all, we'd be delighted to hear from you. Just post them in the chat and we'll address the questions at the end of the session. Okay, so let's move on. I'm delighted today to introduce you to our speakers, who are highly experienced in the world of SAP security and patching. Very delighted to have our guest speaker today, Nipun Mahajan, who is from a client of ours, Lonza, who many of you will know as the manufacturer of the Moderna vaccine. So I think many of us here today are actually customers of yours, Nipun, indirectly maybe. But Nipun is highly experienced in SAP security, and he has also deployed SecurityBridge at Lonza. So he's going to speak to his experience of the challenges with SAP patching, and he's also going to talk about how SecurityBridge can address some of those challenges and what his experience has been in practice implementing this at a very large manufacturing organization. We're also joined here today by Ivan Mans, who's our CTO. And Ivan was the creator, and very modestly looking now, but the creator of the SecurityBridge platform. And he has also been instrumental in engineering the patch management module within SecurityBridge. So Ivan is going to take you through the technical functionality of the patch management module. He's going to show you how it works, and he's going to dive into the technicalities of what it looks like. So let me just take you briefly through today's agenda. So our first speaker today will be Nipun, and he's going to talk about his experiences of dealing with patch management issues and implementing SecurityBridge at Lonza. And then we're going to move over to Ivan, who's actually going to dive into the patch management module, technicalities of the SecurityBridge platform, and he's going to look at, what aspects of patch management can we address, what can we bring to help with efficiency, and what can we bring to help with accuracy in patching, because we understand how challenging it can be. Now, as I mentioned, we do have time at the end for Q&A, so feel free to post your questions and we'll be delighted to answer them. That being said, I'm delighted to hand you over now to Nipun, who will take you through his experiences at Lonza. Nipun, over to you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for this introduction. And I just want to thank you for the opportunity to connect with SAP colleagues from all over the world. And it's really a pleasure for me to share my experience regarding SecurityBridge implementation at Lonza. But what I want to do first is to start off with a story. So in my capacity as the academic relations coordinator at Isaka Denver chapter, recently I got to meet some of the students at University of Colorado, Denver. Now, students asked a lot of fun questions, and one of the interesting one was that, hey, Nipun, how do I start a career in cybersecurity? So my advice to them was to explore cyberspace and not to be afraid, as well as watch some of the Hollywood movies that I have shown up in these slides. Now the question is, why you might be curious why I am presenting this slide to such experienced SAP consultants, and the answer to which is in the next slide. If you could move to the next slide, please. Now, there are specifically 4 quadrants for protecting an SAP system. First is cybersecurity. Second is identity and access management. Third being data protection and privacy. Fourth being risk and compliance. Now, you can easily relate these quadrants to the movies in the previous slide. If you see here, the metrics will depict a stranger leading a hacker to an underground cyber world. The net that has Sandra Bullock in the lead role portrays what will happen if you lose your identity, if your identity gets hacked. Talk about Snowden and what it depicts. What are the implications of a data loss? Look at Tom Hanks in Apollo 11. It showcases that what happens when you don't foresee the risk, and then you say, Houston, we got a problem, and the same happens in SAP. So if you can move to the next slide, please. So in order to solve these problems at Lonza and to protect the four quadrants of security, we are implementing SecurityBridge software. This will involve connecting all our ABAP, HANA, Java instances of SAP for advanced cybersecurity, including real-time threat detection, compliant code, and patching. Now, what we have done is connected all our ABAP clients, including installation, to SecurityBridge, which then sends all the alerts to our SIM system, which is continuously monitored by our SOC team that I am part of for real-time threat detection. If you can move to the next slide, please. Now, what happens is that with any implementation of any new tools, there are multiple challenges or as you say, complexities that are brought up during the implementation. And that did happen with SecurityBridge or any other tool that you implement. So I thought that it would be wise to share my challenges with you and how you could approach it for your implementation. The very first concern is the consumption of the disk space. Now, what happens is that you will need to activate the SAP security audit logs, which is the main source for event monitoring. So you would have to you will need to have a discussion with your basis team. Secondly, you would also need to have discussions with your system owners on where critical data resides in the SAP systems. You would also have to look, hey, is this client obsolete? Is the data that's sitting, is it required, or can we get rid of that? And getting those answers, I would say, is really challenging. Thirdly, and a very important aspect is about activation of different events for event monitoring. When you directly go ahead and activate all the listeners, what would happen is that it would flood the same solution. And you would definitely get a call from your IT manager that, hey, why is SAP giving so many alerts at one time? There are other challenges that you would face in terms of remediation of the vulnerable code, and I bet that there will be many lines of vulnerable code in your system, as well as RFC connections, because even maintaining RFC authorization takes time and a lot of testing. Lastly, one of the major concerns is patching of the SAP systems, because it's not that simple, and it involves collaboration with multiple teams across different domains. And my colleague Ivan will showcase you on how SAP patching is so different. And overall, when you see all these things, you will definitely get a headache. So now that I have spoken about the challenges, now what does a pathway a way look forward? How do we approach the problem and solve it? I would suggest first of the thing is that who is actually responsible for implementing such a solution. It should be, in my opinion, it should be someone who's very close to the CISO, has close contact in governance, and it's not just the responsibility of basis or authorization. It has to be someone close to leadership who leading this initiative. Now, prior to implementation, what you need to do is gather get into business discussions with your system owner and gather information on critical data, maybe obsolete client, because a lot of times, yes, you don't know how data is flowing in SAP systems. I would also suggest you to get in connect with your basis team to discuss implications of security or audit logs activation. And from a governance perspective, create or review the policy to restrict access to future RFC connection. Because a lot of time what happens is that, let's say if you implemented the event monitoring, but yet your policies have not been implemented that restrict assignment of SAP all, you would get a lot of alerts. So you need to take this beforehand and start looking at it. So the next phase I'm going to talk about is the system monitoring. Now, I spoke about how we tend to risk flooding of the SIM system. What will happen if every log gets into an investigation? The SIM will get flooded. So the approach here is that you first go for detection of privilege escalation that will involve uh, creating a security baseline for basis and authorization related steps for your dev, quality, or production instance, and also make sure that you filter your false positives. So if you know someone who has the authority to do that, that should not come up, and you should place a filter for that. And then once you have your filter placed, you will have to move that to your SIM systems for detection, and that is supported by your SOC team. The second phase that is more about lateral movement, and the RFC traffic makes a lot of noise. Trust me, when it comes to the number of function modules that create alerts, there are a lot. So include this as a separate phase and try to reduce the noise by filtering known traffic, and then move on to the next phase to detect data leakage. Now, data leakage is also critical, but I would say just park it till you have your lateral movement control. This will be very essential, when it comes to a zero-day exploit. You will be able to know that at least what's happening in your system. If someone uses a zero-day exploit and tries to escalate the privileges or do a lateral movement, you will know about it. So it really is handy in terms of to implement event monitoring at the beginning of the project. Evan, if you can move to the next slide, please. Now, the third and the very important part is the ABAP code vulnerability analysis. And a lot of people talk about it, but governance is, I would say, is one area that should be equally be stressed. And you should have a policy so that every developer follows that if a SQL injection was detected in a code, it has to be remediated before moving to production. And if you don't have any such policies, you won't see any you won't get much thoughts on them. The next phase, and the very critical one, is awareness. Let your ABAPers go through a round of training on how to remediate vulnerable code. Now, it should not happen that one fine day you just come up to the office and say to them, hey, start looking at the vulnerable code. No, if they cannot swim in the ocean if you don't train them. So it's really important for these developers to be trained, and then they would really help you through the process. The last one is the code that was vulnerable. You have to plan the remediation of that. And that could be included as part of some bigger releases like S4 HANA or any bigger release, because the code needs test. The code that you will remediate will need testing, and that takes time. So equivalent planning will be required for that. You will have to make sure that any future transport, meanwhile, do not have any vulnerabilities included in them. So you would have to get an ABAP test cockpit and get it connected to SecurityBridge software. If you can please move to the next slide. The third one is the interface traffic monitor, and I talked about how many alerts that you would see in event monitoring. Now, when you perform a pen test of these RFC connections, you would certainly find a lot of these connections with SAP all, or maybe some profiles that are not compliant. So what do you do with that? You would have to make sure that these profiles, you have to create custom roles for each and every of these using user IDs and then make an assignment. Again, it's a time-consuming process, and you will need equivalent support from your authorization team to achieve this. Now, the last one that I wanted to talk about, and which is the talk of the day, is patch management. Now, patch management is critical for any infrastructure, and it is equally important to create a policy defining roles and responsibilities of the SAP system owners. Now, this definitely involves collaboration with your basis team, your ABAP team, your authorization team, and it is challenging. I strongly believe that, like, if you have a phased approach on how to implement a tool like SecurityBridge, you would be able to uh, actually protect your four quadrants on SAP. Now, what I would do is I would hand over to Ivan to talk more about SB patching. Ivan?
Yeah, thank you, Nipun. Thank you for giving us actually a great insight into the implementation approach as you've taken it at Lonza. And maybe the slide I'm showing here is a good example of a very similar approach that you have also taken. Is don't look at a single capability. No, really, take two steps back and take a holistic view on if you want to improve your security posture. Where do you start? And the reason of today's talk is clear. It is patch management, and that is basically because patching a system is relatively easy. It is relatively inexpensive, and it may improve your security posture quite a bit. And so this is also why we put it very central. But Nipun, on one side, I very much appreciate that you really talk about the holistic approach, that you don't focus on a single element, and that is very right, because today there are still an enormous amount of 0 days out there. Now we see that with every single SAP patch day, there will always be a series of new vulnerabilities having a solution that would need to be implemented. So all of them have been 0 days for a long time. Now imagine, even if you would have, let's say, a very high severity patch or vulnerability, it may take an organization still a long time in order to get it implemented, in order to get it fully tested, in order to get it completely promoted to a production environment. So some of the very high vulnerabilities may still have a long lead time. Another thing that I've personally, sensed a lot is, whenever we do security assessment, and we probably have a lot of partners on the line as well that also execute security assessments, we are still sometimes surprised on how often we run into customer systems where we see that the patching hygiene, is actually way behind. So we see systems where even a high vulnerability nodes have not been implemented for many years. And even though it is something relatively easy, even within SAP standard, there's some great tool sets out there that you can use in order to implement patching. Now, why do we really put a big focus on this, and why do we put a big focus on applying a holistic approach? Is it may start with patching, but that's not going to help you with 0 days. So you also need to monitor, and therefore, Nipun, you actually phrased that quite well. Is you need to listen to your system, monitor what's ongoing, and also when we talk about new threat intel coming in, what is it that we do? We continuously make sure that we're not only applying or validating missing security patches, we also apply proper threat intel, whereby we really see and listen what is ongoing within your system. And also, Nipun, also there you gave a fairly good example talking about data loss prevention. If something or someone is downloading critical data, he may have used a certain vulnerability as an entry point. So that already motivates why you may need to combine patching with monitoring. And then clearly also the other elements that you see on the slides, actually again complemented, because hardening, patching is a part of your hardening exercise. But besides hardening, known vulnerabilities, SAP still has, a lot of parameters that you may need to enforce. You may need to modify parameters to make your system more secure. You may need to optimize your authorizations. Maybe you have too many standard users that have very powerful rights, etc., etc. So overall, if we look at the SAP system as an application, the attack surface is enormous. So there are multiple disciplines, and the approach that we do with SecurityBridge is we do focus on all of those different disciplines, because in our true opinion, this is the only way to actually gradually, in a guided way, but also in a measurable way, optimize your security posture. And with that said, I suggest that we quickly move on to a demo lab.
Ivan, if I could just very quickly, I know we said we'd do Q&A at the end, but I've been flooded with questions about the 0-day management and handling. Let's just address this now, if I may. Nipun, you hit on a very, very sensitive topic here. Okay, 0 days, we identify them. Ivan, can you explain, please, to our audience what our protocol is of addressing those and informing our clients?
Yeah, so, a 0 day is a vulnerability for which no solution is yet available. Clearly, it is not something that you want to talk about in too many public forums, etc. But, there is a very large community out there of, security researchers. We also run, a number of investigations ourselves. So there's a lot of, threat inputs that we receive. And what we have done so far is we've built an online platform, and that's actually accessible to everyone. So this is not even a commercial product. If you go to cloud.securitybridge.com, there you will find an index of all the SAP security notes, all the SAP security advisories. And what we have done for all of those vulnerabilities, we've also complemented that with additional information from our perspective. Is there a workaround? What is the risk, etc. Now, as soon as there would be a new 0 day, a new vulnerability, clearly there is the SAP responsible disclosing program, which we by all means respect and support. It is important that customers do get updated at the earliest. So the SecurityBridge platform is actually equipped to provide immediate updates for what we call signature updates. You could see it like a virus scanner. Your virus scanner runs locally on your machine, on your endpoint, and the virus manufacturer, which in this case would be us, we would provide virus definitions. So a mechanism for you to identify whether a vulnerability, which is at that moment still unpatched, whether it would be exploited. So this is a good example. Elizabeth, it's good that you mentioned that. So we would start off with the SecurityBridge Cloud, whereby we summarize and document all those vulnerabilities. And in case there would be a new vulnerability popping up, what is happening to customers that actually run SecurityBridge, and SecurityBridge runs entirely on-premise, by the way, it would receive the one operating it, that would receive an instant notification saying there is a new vulnerability in the SAP ecospace, and you would be reminded to actually run an update. Now, as you see, and what you see here is SecurityBridge. Clearly, it is a demo instance. We could not convince Nipun to showcase all the vulnerabilities his organization is facing. Therefore, we do work with a demo lab. And what you see on the top line is all of the different capabilities that we have. And it ranges from monitoring to hardening, code security, interface monitoring. All of those components actually Nipun spoke about. And there is a dedicated app for patch management. Now, as soon as I will click this app, it is going to open a Fiori cockpit whereby, and I may have to re-authenticate. So let me just re-authenticate that, otherwise we're going to run into a timeout. Here we are. So as soon as I open patch management, I get to see, on the top right corner, you already see it, latest advisories. I'm not going to click it because it would start an indexing, and we would not see any results yet. It will take a few minutes before it returns. As soon as there is a new vulnerability, there would be a notification. I'll click on advisories. It goes to the SecurityBridge cloud, and we automatically start validating which of the new threats are actually applicable to the systems that you operate yourself. If we then quickly jump to the landscape view, now clearly there are solutions also within SAP standard. I'm not saying these are good solutions, but we actually take it a few steps further, because until the time you actually apply your patch, monitoring is always running. So we really strive for that platform approach. Not yet fixed, at least listen. There may be an exploit, and you need to know what to listen for. And that is one of those important elements as well when it comes to monitoring. Nipun said, in the beginning we had an enormous amount of events. That's very normal. The system needs to start learning. You need to learn your own system, and there may be a lot of vulnerabilities that create a lot of alerts, and you would have to start remediating them. You would have to start maybe even accepting a certain risk, because a perfect system simply does not exist. There will always be a certain degree of risk acceptance, which is okay as long as you have it documented and as long as you got mitigating controls in place. Now, back to patch management. What you see here is you've got a one-click view on how are you doing in terms of applying patches, taking into account your internal target service level agreements, so you could call it. You may have certain regulations internally that would say, now every second Tuesday of the month, SAP releases notes. If there is a very high severity, you want to have it implemented within, now I'm going to call out something, 2 days. 2 days may not be realistic for every organization, but you may want to set certain thresholds to make sure that you apply patching following the severity rating of a vulnerability. If you got a severity 10, trust me, you want to be patched at the earliest. So by applying a service level or by applying targets, you have a quick view. Not every node needs to be implemented within 2 days. There are nodes that can just go with a standard release, giving you more than sufficient time to test. But important, the very urgent ones, get visibility on them and get them implemented at the earliest. Now, if we just, and you quickly get to see how is my patching status across all my different systems. And let me just randomly take an example system. Then as soon as we deep dive into a system, we're going to see, first of all, how many nodes are still missing. And here in this example, we see, and by the way, this is not a very secure system. It is a pretty standard demo environment that we use. We have 2 hot news that are currently missing. Now, those 2 hot news may still mean a major attack surface. So we instantly know which are the nodes to apply. Now, I already hear some questions coming. You can do the same in standard, and to a certain extent, that's true. The standard is not going to monitor for you. And within the standard, we've gone the extra mile by making sure that you don't have false positives. When there is a security node, SAP has a wide range of products in portfolio, and all of these products may have different technology stacks. They may be different modules installed, different components installed. Clearly, you don't want to see a node that deals with a HANA vulnerability if you don't even run a HANA database. And so that's just a very basic example. And what we do is we validate all the application components, we validate the database, we validate your kernel, reducing the amount of false positives and eventually also less work, right? Because clearly, validating all of this manually is going to be a very tedious exercise. In average, maybe let's say SAP releases 15 to 20 nodes every month. But if you've got a few hundred systems, that still means a lot of work. So with a single click, literally in minutes, you will have that overview and you know exactly where you're missing patches per system. Now, if we just have a look at a single example, we have here in a security note, I won't even go into the contents. I have no idea what this is. Actually, I do know, but I'm not going to go into details. The first one we see, it's completely missing here. Now, especially when you handle nodes by, patch day, you deal with 15, 20 nodes, and you have to validate them across all your systems. You want to have a view on which of those systems this node is applicable to. So we provide a 360-degree view. You can start either with single nodes, or you can start hardening system by system. Both mechanisms we do support. Now, just besides that, that quick view on what is missing and the linking to the monitoring, what we also have is, and this is actually quite new, if we got customers on the line, don't look for the button in your system. It will not yet be there. So this is actually one of the early versions that we showcase here. There's going to be a new button that says implement. For development systems, we will support you with the implementation. And clearly, we're not going to implement that in production. So we will respect the standard change management flow that you have. So we would allow you to implement that on the development system, clearly following your change document process. And we're going to track, if you capture it in a transport, where is going to be that transport. So this way, we're also able to give you reports on how long did it take for you to move a patch from development to eventually production. And that's a wealth of information, and that is not that easy normally with standard tooling to get out of a system. Now, another interesting element that we have is, as soon as you have a vulnerability, what is the impact? Because you could say, I think one of the questions asked and what, also reflected in the title of today's session is, why is SAP patching so different than, running an update on your iPhone or running an update on your Windows instance? That's because of impact. You all run precious business, and patching does not mean that even your patch is going to be bug-free. And there's always a risk that a fix is creating another issue. So clearly, for components which are part of your crucial business process, you probably want to enforce a good amount of testing. And therefore, it's important to know which of the components are in use and which ones are not in use. And there, I may trigger an interesting conversation amongst the audience here is, if you have a theoretical vulnerability, and a theoretical vulnerability for me would mean you actually have the software, it is running on your system, there's a certain module, it's technically existing, but you're not using it. Is that a vulnerability, yes or no? Now, the answer for every cyber expert will say yes, because it can be exploited whether you're using it or not. But these are components that you can actually patch even with your eyes closed. Theoretically, no testing would be required because your business is not using it. Now, for that, we do have an impact button. And what that impact button is going to do, if you got users procedure logging, UPL, which is an SAP standard technology, there's also the ABAP, I can't recall the exact name, so there is a successor to UPL. As soon as you have that recording active, what we do is we're going to see within the security notes, if it deals with ABAP, of course, the programs, the functions, or the objects that are going to be modified, are they actually in use by your business? If not, you can safely assume it's not in use, and you can actually implement at a much higher speed. So that would massively simplify. Good. Now, also looking a little bit at the clock, and I still want to leave some room in case we do have questions. And feel free, I do invite everyone, just ask your questions within the chat. Patching is a very crucial element in your security posture. And your security posture will always depend upon, on many components. It will depend upon your code base, because you may patch SAP standards, but SAP is not going to help you instantly with patching custom code. You may have an entire legacy of vulnerabilities, even a lot of 0 days. No one is going to help you with. And I'm not saying it's instantly a drama, because a lot of these internal code vulnerabilities, they may also be unknown. And as long as they are 0 days and no one knows about it, no one can exploit them. But it's important, get a grip on, get an understanding on how secure your internal code base is, because if there would be a major vulnerability that is easy to spot and that could have a devastating effect, fixing it is typically the easy path. The complex part is to identify the vulnerabilities. But for that, we do have the code vulnerability analyzer that allows you to quickly validate your entire code base. Literally, in about 15 minutes, you have a very good clue on how secure your system is. Now, all of this is being summarized in what we call the security compliance dashboard, which is basically a dashboard that shows the security state of your entire system. And patching is one of those tiny elements. I won't see it, and it's not tiny, it's a major element, because it's something that you can easily achieve with relatively low effort. And it belongs to the area of responsibility for the basis team. So in here, you can see we have a lot of controls, basis, hardening. These guys deal with a lot of basis settings like profile parameters, system parameters, endless. You could see the list there. It's a very long list that the basis, the SAP basis team would have to deal with. But if we just search for the word patch on the top, you're going to see. Oh no, that is. Let me see. Note. Don't know the exact word for it. Implemented security nodes. Here we go. Or missing security nodes. So we have controls that actually also on a static view are going to help you with tracking progress. And so here we are in one development system. Apparently we're using a standard baseline and we're looking at the latest results. We got two controls. We have one control that's going to guide you with how many missing nodes do you have. Now it may be very important for you to really start tracking this in order to making sure that your system, your security posture is not deteriorating over time. Because what we've seen sometimes, and if we have auditors on the line, they may also confirm this. You do a system assessment. We may see how secure or insecure the system is. And then all of a sudden you have a bit of a rush where people start implementing patches because someone has been screaming. Now, once this is done, then what we've seen a few times is then it's going to be silent for a long time, for a few months, and new vulnerabilities come in and, patching is again being forgotten until the next audit. The next audit again reveals missing issues. No, patching is something that you need to do on a continuous basis. It is not a project. It is a commodity, and it's something that you need to do as part of your very basic housekeeping. And all of these, the graphs and the tools that you will have within SecurityBridge will help you to actually get a full grip on this. So in order to, again, conclude, and then Elizabeth, I promise I'll stop my preaching. How do we deal with security, with vulnerabilities? Going from 0 days, taking the necessary threat intel, we move everything into our cloud instance. We actively notify our customer base saying, yes, there is a vulnerability. With patch management, you can identify what is the scope, how much am I impacted with a certain patch day. We guide you with the process to get it implemented as soon as possible. Clearly, you need to follow your internal processes. And we have a dashboard on top of that in order to guide you to see, do we stay on track? So that is shortly summarized. Nipun, is that I see you smiling. Is that the same feeling that you have, as a customer?
Absolutely. I would agree on that. And one part is that governance is really important when it comes to patching. You should have a patch coordinator who manages those monthly meetings for security notes and everything. So if the process is not followed, as you said, this will be a thing of next audit. So talk about governance with your CISO and how to look at patch management.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, brilliant. And Nipun, it's clearly you don't have to disclose anything, but what is, to your experience, how is it at Nipun, or how is it at Lonza, or how is it at customers that you previously worked at? Did you see that patching was something that has been underestimated for a long time?
Absolutely, I would agree. I mean, you don't have monthly calls or any of the customers that have worked on. So still, both a map code vulnerability and patching are not something that the industry is looking into right now.
Okay, good. No, many thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much. Ivan, should we move to Q&A now, or you like to
Oh
cover
yes,
off?
absolutely.
Okay, great. Well, we've been flooded with lots of questions about 0 days, and I think we've addressed those. One of the questions was how we use. One client said we're using a technology that supposedly addresses vulnerabilities, but we're faced with a lot of false positives. How do you handle those? I think we've addressed that by the way that the technology weeds those out. So, okay, we can address that one individually. The next question was for Nipun, and it was, Nipun, do you integrate with a SIM such as Splunk or QRadar or any of those other products, and how does that work?
Sure, and that's a really great question. So what we have done is we feed the SecurityBridge logs to our same system called as SecureWorks, and that is further connected to our source system. So eventually there is a CVF file that gets picked up from SecurityBridge, and we just get the alerts, relevant alerts from SecurityBridge to our SIM system.
Okay, fantastic. And then another question that we had for you, Nipun, was prior to implementing SecurityBridge, did you have any anticipations of how long it would take to implement a security tool? And what was your expectations versus the reality?
I mean, I spoke about that. Yes, it could be implemented in a week, but it's more about your baselines, Elizabeth. How phased are you in terms of your implementation approach? If you think you want to do it in 6 months, don't think about it. It's gonna take time eventually to remove all false positives and come stable. So first focus on your, I would say, first focus on your baseline. Filter the false positives, and then send your alerts to your SIM system, not prior to that.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Nipun. And then a question for you, Ivan, was how often do we see high severity notes?
Oh, that's actually a very tricky one. I would have to do the count. It very much differs, and I think putting a real metrics on it is close to impossible. We've seen patch days where there is a single high severity note, and we've seen, if we look at the severity 10 notes, typically we see them in a kind of a wave. But I think one could assume, every single patch day, which is about every single month, we see 1 or 2 high severity notes. Yeah, and I think this is to a great extent very similar to how we also see it with other technologies. So there's a good reason why it's called Patching Tuesday. It's not just something that SAP invented. And so a lot of the large software manufacturers actually follow the very same process. Where SAP is a little bit different is, the effort it takes to apply a patch. So yes, it is a bit more effort than just, applying an update on your Windows system or on your iPhone.
Okay, thank you, Ivan. We've got a couple of other questions. I think we're we're running out of time here. We're coming up to the end of the session, but we will be addressing all of your questions individually. So thank you very much for sharing those. I think finally, I'd just like to say that, patch management is a challenge for any organization running SAP. It's an ongoing challenge, and there are tools available to make that more efficient and also to save you time and money. Now, if you want to get a real sense of the time and money that it can save you, I would urge you to visit our website, where we actually have a calculator that is incredibly simple to use. Just plug your numbers in and it will show you how much more efficient you can be using technology to address a lot of the mundane aspects of patching, and it'll show you what your calculations are of your actual savings. So this is something that you can use. It's free to use. It's very simple. I'd urge you to try it out, give it a go. Finally, I'd like to say thank you very much to Nipun for sharing some time out of what I'm sure is an incredibly busy schedule, to share your experience of how you have improved efficiency in patch management, and I'm sure all of us here in our audience is very, very grateful for the insight that you've given us and the help you've given us. So thank you, Nipun. And I would also encourage anybody here to contact us for more information. We'd be delighted to hear from you, and we'd be delighted to give you some demonstrations, technical deep dive, whatever it needs for you to get an understanding of how we can help you in your SAP security journey. So with that being said, we are at the end of the hour. Thank you very much, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the session. Hope to see you again. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.